How long can you be clinically dead and then still brought back?
No matter how different we are, there's still common ground.
Yes, love it. Those topics and more in this week's BioTrekkie with the Admiral, starting now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to BioTrekkie with the Admiral. My name is Mohamed Noor. I'm a biology professor at Duke University, and I'm an occasional science consultant for the Star Trek universe.
And I'm Jayne Brook. I played Admiral Katrina Cornwell on the first two seasons of Star Trek Discovery.
And
And
well,
I am here with my great friend Mohamed to talk about all things biology and a little bit more on this sadly last season of Star Trek Discovery. So we always start with anything that has jumped out at Mohamed biologically speaking, in these episodes 7 and 8. So Mohammed, take it away. Let us know what jumped out at you.
sure thing. There was not a lot of biology in these two episodes, even though they were really awesome episodes, but I have a couple of things we can talk a little bit about at least. One of them, you might remember after Locke's injury, there was a comment about somatic cell regeneration in cold. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and, just tweak the language a little bit. Also related to Locke, we're going to talk about this concept of reviving somebody who is clinically dead. And last part, those are both mostly from episode 7. Episode 8 had root cutting from the Tully tree that had the world root. Ah, that was a very moving scene. So just a couple of quick words on like root cuttings here on Earth.
Oh yeah. Well, this is cool. So yeah, so take it away. Well, I can't remember the word that you used for the somatic, what was it? Somatic
Somatic cell
cell?
regeneration.
Okay, great.
Awesome. So, well, actually, let me define it. A somatic cell is basically any cell in your body that is not like a sperm or egg or going to become a sperm or egg. So, like most of our cells are somatic cells. So, it's a little unnecessary to say somatic cell, but that's okay. And actually, I don't think they even really meant cell regeneration, but I think maybe what they meant was probably more like tissue regeneration, because as you recall, Locke was actually injured, and so I assume that like some tissues were actually punctured in some way. So that's probably more what they meant. Now, one of the things that Culber immediately did was he did this cold on there. Now, cold is actually really good in some respects, not necessarily in all respects, in the context of trying to heal somebody after a traumatic injury. So it's good for stopping inflammation, right? You don't want something to become overly inflamed. And it's also good because it limits your pain a little bit, which is obviously vital if you're in terrible shape. It's not perfect because what it can actually do is it can actually slow down healing, even though you're reducing inflammation, but the actual healing process is not, it might actually be slowed down, in part because you're probably slowing down blood flow over there. But it is still a technique that's used. There's actually one thing I found that actually seemed to look visibly similar to what we saw Culber doing. It's called, I have to look this up, hyperbaric gaseous cryotherapy.
Wow, that's such a thing.
Yeah, apparently it's a thing. I mean, I found it in PubMed. So again, the medical database there, but it's something where essentially you're putting like super cold carbon dioxide on there, and it helps just very localized keep certain areas cold. Apparently, that's something that is used at times, and there's at least a couple of studies which suggest it's possibly useful. But again, it's always everything's always a mixed bag, and it's tricky too because when you think about healing, what you don't want to do, people sometimes think that like, if you have a big open wound, you want to show it for air so it like clots or something like that. But actually, no, you don't really want that. It's actually much more important to keep it covered because what you don't want a wound to do is you don't want it to dry out. Right. So if things dry out, that's going to kill some of the cells that are there. You need moisture. Moisture is vital for healing in there. So
That two things you've said.
hey,
I've Because I know people wrap wounds, but that
yeah.
is a really good point. I never keep it moist. But the other thing for the cold, because I've had gum surgeries,
Uh-huh.
I've got another one coming up,
Oh,
and you have to put like cold peas, to stop the inflammation. But that's interesting. So you want your body to go through that inflammation in order to heal. You don't want to stop it completely.
well, not necessarily the inflammation. You still want blood flow. That's the key. Like you still want blood flow going there. So what you don't want to do is limit it. So I mean, often the inflammation response is quick and it's acute. So if you can get through that period and then it's like, okay, now let it just like heal. Like don't just ice it forever kind of thing.
Right. Right. Because I'm looking forward to cold packs. You
Yeah. I mean, it's great for the pain and partly because of the inflammation too. I mean, obviously the more we reduce inflammation, often the more we're reducing pain with it too. So that's interesting. There's not a whole lot more to say about that, but I did notice that as that was happening, like, oh, interesting. Especially that comment about the somatic cell regeneration, like, oh, that's oddly specific. Okay. But who knows? Again, 32nd century, maybe they know some things that we don't know right now. Maybe there's some aspect there, literally in terms of cell regeneration, that's helpful.
Such fast cell regeneration that it's actually tissue regeneration or something. I don't know.
Maybe,
Yeah.
or something that's just producing more cells overall. Who knows? But
So,
that,
yeah, the next thing you were going to talk about, if you are finished with that,
yeah,
is the perennial, my gosh,
yeah,
as long as mankind has been around, he's, mankind, and I shouldn't say mankind, humankind.
yeah,
That was, I've been wondering, can you come back from
yeah.
death?
I mean, the short answer, obviously, in very short terms, if you're talking about clinical death just means the heart stops, right? I mean, I know people who've been clinically dead and they've come back. I mean, that's not that aspect is possible. So, there's sort of the phases you might imagine. It's like there's heart stops, and this is one of the reasons that you want to do CPR is you want to maintain that sort of flow of blood to the various cells and things like that, and also keep oxygenation. That's why you're blowing in there to keep stuff going in. So that's one aspect. One of the organs that uses the most oxygen out of the blood is, of course, the brain. I mean, your muscles do if you're using them a lot, but I mean, your brain is using a lot all the time. You really don't want the brain to die, right? That's bad, and it'll die pretty quick, especially if it's not getting oxygen. It'll die pretty quick. It could be. I mean, you actually can get damage, like irreparable damage, literally within a few minutes if there's nothing happening there. But there's exceptions. I'll come back to that in just a second. And then ultimately, like, you just have random other organs and cells all over your body just dying over time. Like, it's not like your brain is dead and boom, all the rest of you is dead, but your cells may still be doing stuff for a while thereafter. But I looked up because I was curious, what's the longest time somebody's heart stopped and they still had full neurological recovery? And like on the Guinness Book of World Records website or something like that, there was somebody who went almost 9 hours. But there's a big but here, and this actually connects to the brain. But they were super cold. This was like somebody on a mountain in an ice thing, right? And there were some other examples of really long ones, and it was always in that sort of like, fell into the snow and were iced up and things like that. Those are the ones that went for a really long time. And when I say no neurological damage, I don't necessarily know that it's zero, but it was not obvious when they came back out, aside from some memory loss, that they were messed up. So
But if they were 9 hours that cold, wouldn't they have, like, the brain was okay, but they lost other limbs to frostbite? I mean,
no, I
yeah,
see
that's
neurological
amazing.
damage. I don't know about other cell damage.
Yeah.
It was like 8 hours, some minutes. It was something crazy. Actually, I misread it. First, I thought I said 8 minutes. And I was like, oh, 8 hours? What? That's
Wow.
crazy. But apparently, I mean, at least as far as they know. But this actually connects well with the whole lock thing because as you might remember there in the end, I guess it was in episode 8, we saw his body, but it was back in the refrigeration suit. So maybe they're basically like keeping him cold so something can happen. Now, of course, Locke has an actual like injury. It's not just his heart stop. There's actually an injury. I'm setting that part aside and just kind of ignoring that aspect because I don't know what weird organs he even has, much less which ones are injured or how. But
Didn't they heal the injury or didn't know? Yeah,
it was
I mean,
never
he had
quite
that
clear to
pretty
me.
bad injury.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
but
brought the
yeah,
other doctor in to help, and then it was never quite clear what the other doctor then
yeah,
did to heal things up. So not so obvious, but
yeah.
yeah, again, typically, you get brain damage within minutes and things like that. Now, obviously, the sort of tension about these different stages of death is problematic in the context of organ donation, right? Because if you're going to pass an organ on to somebody else, you'd want it to be as little as possible. On the other hand, most family members and the person themselves probably really don't want you to be too aggressive, like,
Harvested.
they're dead, let's pull it out.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting tension there, and there's no great answer to that. But I just wanted to raise that aspect to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's because it's all different from comas. Comas are not the same. Your brain is still operating during a coma. Your brain is still having
Well, if
activity.
you're in a coma, then
Yeah,
then you're, yeah. I
yeah,
like,
yeah. That's
yeah. I had a brother who was in a coma. He got in a bad car accident and he was in a coma for like 6 weeks.
wow.
So yeah, my brother, when he was young, was in a terrible car accident and was in a coma for like 6 weeks. They didn't think he would come back, but he did. And unbelievably, he had, that was a long coma. He had been in a coma overnight. They call it a coma if it's over, I've learned about this. If it's over like 12 hours
Oh,
unconscious, it can go into coma. I don't quote me on that, but it's a, number of hours. And he had fallen off a table when he was little. So the car accident was the second time he hit his head. And then, if you can believe it, Guinness Book of World Records, he had another accident where he fell and he was in a coma a third time in his life. So this poor
poor
guy.
guy. Wow. Yeah, and then the last thing I had in terms of biology was just a really quick thing about the root cutting, which I love that. I thought that was so sweet,
Oh,
the Thule tree like root bit there, because I mean it gives hope that they can actually create another world root someplace else. Maybe not on Quajon, obviously since Quajon's gone, but someplace else. And there's a lot
yeah.
of plants that can be regrown from root cuttings. I actually looked up, and there's even some sort of woody trees like maple that you can do that for.
When they're
And
that old, like if you have a root and it's really old, it might still.
So I couldn't find anything about age. I was looking and I could not find something like how long it would be good for. They always just said like use it soon. So that
It
and I,
go it goes back to the thing you were talking about, how things have to stay moist. So
yeah,
you would wish the archive would keep that root moist. It looked a little dry to me.
it looked dry, but we don't actually know what it was doing. So maybe they had it in something there. But actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that because that's exactly where I was going to go. What some people do is they'll essentially like soak. They'll essentially put the cutting underwater or something like that. But it needs oxygen, right? It still needs to have some sort of respiration in terms of its cells there. But you also don't want it to get so wet that it's going to mold over, right? So you
Right.
want like moist but not
Little
underwater.
bit. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to submerge it. It's not an underwater plant.
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly,
Right.
exactly. So that was interesting. That was, but
Well,
again, not a whole lot of biology in these two episodes.
I have to confess that as I was watching episodes 7 and 8, in the back of my mind, I started watching, I'm thinking, I wonder what Mohammed is going to pull from this, because nothing was very obvious to me, except, the wound.
Yeah,
But yeah. But did we talk about the idea of being brought back to life? Did you talk about that
it's
biologically? I mean,
well, it's interesting to think like what that means. So again, like it's fairly common that if you've been clinically dead and you don't have CPR going, things like that, that within a couple of minutes, brain damage
well,
is very
yeah,
low, right? It's very, very
but yes, we know that there's brain damage and stuff, but so, I mean, scientifically, biologically speaking, the idea of having Locke there for quite a while, clinically dead, but it's Star Trek, so they're going to be able to do it.
and he's not
We'll
human.
take, I hope.
Again, like
I
green
hope.
physiology could be very radically different from our physiology there too. The fact they're keeping him cold is probably the best thing they can do. So, I mean, I'll say it's we cannot prove it impossible.
Uh, we'll have to wait and see.
I have to wait and see.
Um,
And they may not do it. For all we know, it's not going to work. I mean,
right. Yeah. They might have a new thing that they come up with.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, for me, what I keep thinking about when I look at these episodes is, I have talked a lot already about individual actors, and I do have a couple shout outs today for episodes 7 and 8. And I've talked about how, production wise, in terms of the actors having to interact with production, that I'm very impressed with how, like Sonequa, all of them, they'll go, whoop, and they'll be so exact when there's nothing there, and then but for me, what is hitting me in this season is the through lines, the themes, the big questions that are being asked. And it's in all of the characters' mouths, these themes of, we talked last show about forgiveness and second chances, and is there something greater than us? I mean, I do love uh what they're wrestling with this season. I think it's excellent. I always say I love the Rayner character. I think he's great. um they the in the beginning, when they're talking about how everything comes, well, maybe this is actually my note. Locke has had a trouble with his uncle.
Yeah.
And I wrote, no matter who it is and whatever world they come from, I wrote down, it seems to all come down to interpersonal dynamics, family, relations, friends. You get, that's what it comes down to. I mean, one guy like Hitler can affect,
That
it's
one guy was pretty bad too. I mean, it was interesting. It was interesting how Maul manipulated that, or it seems like was manipulated that guy all the way to the end.
through the episodes,
Yeah,
through 7 and 8, you're saying that she keeps trying to, she keeps trying to intercede with the craziness of the uncle. Yeah. And
yeah,
we'll see ultimately. We have only 2 more episodes after this, so I'm very curious to know where it goes.
yeah.
Um, I liked the scene between Stamets and Book. They were, that was really nice together. You don't see them together a lot, so that was nice. Um, I always talk about, I think I said it last time, the authenticity of Sonequa. Um, just looking through my notes here. I loved that when Culber was talking to Locke and Culber said, no, however different we are, there's always common ground.
I love
And
that.
then Locke replied, Maul loves me because of my differences, not despite them. And that was a really good line. I mean, it's a really good thing to mull over, because I think as humans, we tend to want people to agree with us,
Yeah.
you know, and why we think we have a right to do that is the perennial problem. Um, the they're making them kind of Bonnie and Clyde, Maul and which is why, going back to our first episode, which might be why Michelle Paradis called her Maul. Um, let's see, she had a great moment. I'm gonna give her credit. Eve.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Eve
Eve
Harlow.
Harlow, great moment as an actress. She did a great job over during the death scene of Locke. I thought she did a really great, authentic job there. Um, uh,
You worked well, not maybe not in the scene, but you worked with Rachel and Cheryl, who came back as Non in that.
I
And
did. I was happy to see her. I didn't,
yeah,
I'm not sure, we didn't, work together that much, but we would be in the makeup trailer together. I really like her. And I was really happy to see her when she showed up, again as the bodyguard. Um, this is a tiny little production moment. It could be editing, it could be the director. I think it's the director thinking of the editing and then the editor executing it. But I thought it was really great at the end of, it was at the end of episode 7. Rayner and Burnham turn in profile and go like this and disappear. And
mhm,
then they walk in to the bridge together. It was
mhm.
just well thought out. I thought it was I mean, it's a small thing, but
Yeah,
the director has to think, what's my transition between scenes? Or, maybe the editor did it, but I like that moment.
that is
It was
cool.
at the very end. Oh yeah, I think it was the end of that. Okay, so that was good. And then episode 8.
Oh, one other thing for episode 7, I like
Oh yeah.
the humor there with Jet Reno, of course. Anything with her is always great when she's talking about her past jobs and like, oh, she's a bartender. She made the 7 of limes drink.
That's the beginning of episode 8, and that's exactly what I was going to say,
Oh,
right?
I'm sorry. I thought that was in
Beginning-
7. I got that wrong.
Was that in 7?
I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
You're right. No, I think you're right, because I wrote here. I don't know why. I wrote, I love Tig Notaro. I wrote, I have the funniest notes, but that must have been because I think that because I also wrote, it was a really cool opening with the Breen, pounding their staffs.
Yeah.
So maybe they did the opening before the commercial,
Oh,
before
maybe.
the credits with Tig Notaro, and then afterwards, I don't know,
Yeah.
but we agree that
Yeah.
was funny. She's
Yeah.
very, well,
Those
I've
are,
done this, I've done that, and yeah, and then it comes back later. Well, I might have something to say about that,
yeah. That actually, there was that scene where she made this passing comment. Oh, actually, Adira first made a passing comment saying, "You really got around." Well, not like that. And Jet Reno was like, "Yeah, like that." Until he's like, "Story for another time."
She's funny. Story for another time. I mean,
Yeah.
she's so dry. She's so dry. It's funny. Um, And of course, you and I talked, briefly about it. The tour guide
Oh my
at
gosh.
the archive, hilarious, wonderful casting. And
Hy'Rell. What's her
I
name?
mean, just making a joke about, the wonderful tour guides we've all had, who do a good job. But what was so cool about this this casting and this writing was, they made her so threatening in her non-threateningness. Like, I thought this woman could very nicely kill you, and she would do it, "Hey, we have a book," and off with her head. It's kind of almost like it's hilarious. She
I
was
love it.
she was really good.
Oh my God.
When she came back after talking to the Breen, she said, um, I can't remember the line, but she was like, "That didn't go quite as well as we had hoped." It was funny.
I loved everything being, but first there's a little speech we like to give. We have the largest and oldest known collection of historical and cultural artifacts. It's
Exact
such a
speech that
tour
we
guide.
all would get if we went to that archive.
Totally.
And then the look between Burnham and Rayner, and we're in a bit of a hurry, or
Yeah.
um,
And a
but that was
disclaimer
funny.
about like no loss of limbs or whatever like that if you don't
Yeah.
pay attention.
We are not responsible. Let me just say, uh, I wrote kind of Wizard of Ozzy. It was
Yeah.
kind of fun, like when
That's a great analogy.
yeah. And of course, as a bookworm myself, I just love the archive. I mean, I love all these books, and I love that. And speaking of book, of course, they made that great joke where the archivist says, um, "How wonderful to have a book visit me."
It was so corny. I loved it.
Yeah, it's like you got to make that joke. But yeah, the David Ajala, I wrote David Ajala is so good. That's my note. The moment he had in the library when she gave him the last, the route that we've been talking about. I mean,
Mm.
he did he's a study in great acting, because it makes you choke up when
Yeah.
you see someone try not to cry, not when they release the tension by crying. I mean, of course, sometimes you cry, um, but it was just a study, and really, he did a great job with that. He really did. Because you have to remember, this is a human being holding a prop.
Yeah.
Like, you're watching it and you think it's this, you know, alien person, really, like really from that planet that really got destroyed. I mean, this is really an art form. This person has to make that real
Yeah.
for themselves and for
Yeah.
us. And he did a great job.
So when you had
So
to do that
that's
in the past, did you try to summon that emotion yourself, and did you ever have to like recover afterwards?
I think everyone responds differently. I think some actors can play a very emotional scene and it's over, and they can be like, okay, what's next? And then, not in a disrespectful way to the scene, but they can come in and out of it very fast.
Mhm.
Others say that they want to be in it. It's just different personalities, want to be in it, or feel very self-conscious and don't want people to look at them, probably because they're just self-conscious.
Mhm.
Um, um, so I couldn't speak for David, but I would be more, I'd be, I'd be, I think you're so happy as an actor if you've accomplished your job well. I mean, if you accomplish a great take and the scene is done, I mean, I don't personally carry it. I'm thinking you carry it in you, but you don't remain
Yeah.
probably in that
You're
same,
not
you
in
couldn't
that world anymore. So
remain in that same emotional space probably. Um, and then, I was that was really great the way the writers, it was the way that they showed how Burnham's character approached this test in with her brains, and she got calm, and she was like, it's this, and even when she solved it and got back to that center space, she still hadn't done it. And it was a really wonderful journey that they took the time, that she had to get to the point where she said, I want to fix it, but I don't know how. She had to get to the point where she said, I just don't know. And all of that talking um, was really good. That whole scene between the pretend book, the book of her mind, it was really, uh, that was really good. She had to, I mean, I made a joke about someone in that writing room. A few of them are Jungians, but, they are addressing this, looking at all
yeah.
parts of your unconscious. And the archive getting destroyed, I was upset about that. I mean, I know it didn't get completely destroyed, but I didn't like all of it. Yeah, that's all. In terms of production, I always think about the designers and the prop people, that they have to create something, you know.
What did you think of Book's costume in Michael's head?
Yeah, I don't know why they decided on that. I don't know if they decided on that because it was somewhat, now that I'm thinking of it, it was somewhat analogous to the archivist's big.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
So maybe her mind immediately dressed Book, uh,
I like the little spikes on the
own
shoulders.
kind of robe.
Yeah. That was,
Maybe in her mind, she knows that Book has a wisdom because he was kind of dressed as a sort of wisdom character.
yeah, or
Um,
wizard.
so maybe she unconsciously knows that Book has something to teach her, and that would be that would be the character her mind would use to deliver this message, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm assuming when they shot it, they probably did all the scenes where Book wore that, and then did all the ones where he was wearing his regular suit.
Yeah,
They wouldn't go back and forth.
yeah, they probably they call boarding it, you know, when you create the board of when we're doing what. Um, but I don't know. I don't know how I would have to, there might be too many scenes to do it all in one day. I don't know. I can't remember but
What's
yeah.
the boarding? Is there actually like a physical board with like sticky notes on it?
Probably in the old days, I think it used to be a physical board with strips that the ADs would move physically around to figure out when we're going to do what. But now they can do it all on their computer.
Oh
You
yeah. Yeah, that's
know.
cool. Oh, lots of good stuff in these episodes now. We
There are
only
good things, and they've got only two more to. I'm very, very curious to know how they wrap it up.
yeah, and this is like wrapping it up, like wrapping up all of Star Trek Discovery in the next two
Yeah,
episodes. That's a wrap up. It'll be
it's
interesting
a
to
real wrap up, and I think they're doing a great job this season. I really appreciate personally. I really deeply appreciate them delving into these questions of life because these are the things we all have to deal with, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So,
And doing it well too. It's the performances are amazing.
agree.
All good stuff. But anyway, always wonderful to chat with you, my friend.
Always great. Really fun. Thank you.
So tune in 2 weeks for our discussion on the last two episodes ever of Star Trek Discovery. Oh man.
Yeah.
What a ride.
Yeah, what a ride.
Thanks for watching with us.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you.